Just a little bit of introduction and history. Paul Laidler was a lecturer in electrical engineering at Longlands College in Middlesbrough. He'd been there quite a long time and he was getting a bit sick of teaching, I think. He went to a seminar about the new CE marking that was coming in 1995, and he saw it as a way of escaping some of the teaching and bring some money into the college. So he set up Longlands Advisory and Consultancy Services. He was in the right place at the right time, and it took off in quite a big way. Not so much with small to medium enterprises in the Northeast, which is what it was aimed at, but his first customers were Samsung in Korea and Gillette in Boston. I joined Longlands in 1995. In 1998, the principal decided that what we were doing was not really education related. So we were invited to leave and we set up Laidler Associates. Laidler was probably one of the first and certainly best machinery safety consultancies. At the time, we tried to give chip with the PPMA very early on. One of the things that we weren't able to prove was competence, because at the time there were no CE marking qualifications, there was very little available. So we became a notified body, which meant we could assess Annex 4 machinery. The benefits of this meant that we could, or that we had to, attend twice yearly meetings with the HSE and the DTI at the time. And we met with the people who were involved with the Machinery Directive and the new Machinery Directive that came out in 2010. So that was very useful. In 2010, Laidler became part of TÜV-SÜD. Paul decided he wanted to retire, which he finally did in 2015. In 2012, we went from 35 people to 17,000 people, and it was a bit of a culture change. So in 2012, I left to set Safe Machine up, and I've continued to do that. One of the things that we do is work with Japanese and American companies primarily, and we acted as the person to compile technical files. With Brexit and with the new changes coming in July, Safe Machine weren't allowed to do this any longer. So we set up, in 2019, we set up whole technical files in Ireland. The following is primarily about machinery, but all other directives that require CE marking have very similar requirements. So if you are involved with other equipment, such as electrical equipment or anything like that, a lot of the requirements still apply. It's just an introduction. The changes need to be addressed correctly. We are running some CE marking and UKCA marking seminars, which are about 3 hours, where we go through what the requirements are in some detail, and Shelley is organising those as well. Specific products might have different requirements. It is always up to the manufacturer or supplier to ensure that they meet the requirements for the product. There's nobody will tell you exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You need to understand what's right for your product. As Northern Ireland is being treated differently due to the Northern Ireland Protocol, England, Scotland and Wales are referred to as GB. I'll try and do that through the presentation. There is common legislation. So for machinery, there are a number of directives that apply. So the prime one is the Machinery Directive 2006-42 EC. The number means it was the 42nd directive produced in 2006. The Low Voltage Directive applies. However, the Machinery Directive covers the Low Voltage Directive, so you don't normally need to specify the Low Voltage Directive on declarations if you've addressed the Machinery Directive. EMC is electromagnetic compatibility, pressure equipment, explosive atmospheres, whatever the directive is, it's up to the manufacturer to determine which directives apply and apply them. At the moment, there's around 70 directives that require CE marking. The directives were brought into UK law. So when the directive was brought in, it was brought into UK law at the time. So the Machinery Directive became the Supply of Machinery Safety Regulations 2008. Low voltage became Electrical Equipment Safety Regulations 2016, and so on. The way the legislation has been written, it's actually in quite a mess at the moment. If you go onto the gov.uk website, you cannot find a decent version of the current Supply of Machinery Safety Regulations with the changes. So there have been changes made, but they haven't actually been made within the legislation. When that happens, it's likely that the numbers will change, the dates will change. So markings. At present, the EU or the European Economic Area requires CE marking for products and machinery. The CE must be in that specific format without the grid, but it has to be laid out in that format. If it isn't in that format, it's not a correct CE mark, and the product could be stopped or queried. GB requires UKCA marking. That means UK compliance assessed, and that's the logo there. Northern Ireland still requires CE marking. So nothing has changed really within Northern Ireland, except that under certain circumstances, UKNI marking is required. It probably won't affect the majority of PPMA members, but it's something just to be aware of. In all cases, the markings must be greater than 5 millimeters in height on manufacturer's plates. UKCA marking applies from the 1st of January 2021. So you can apply the UKCA marking anytime during 2021. If the product was already CE marked and has been available in the EU, then you have until 1st of January 2022 to apply the UKCA marking. But by the end of this year, anything without UKCA marking could be stopped from being sold. There's different rules for chemicals, medicines, vehicles, and aerospace. If relevant, these can be found on the gov.uk website. The differences. At the moment, the UK legislation is directly derived from the EU directives, so there is no change apart from a few minor wording changes. There was a new statutory instrument, the Product Safety and Metrology Amendment EU Exit Regulations 2019, has been put into place, and that identifies the changes to the regulations, which allows the CE to be replaced by the UKCA. The main changes are to replace the need for the documentation to be in a community language to be in English, and for declarations to reference the UK legislation rather than EU directives. The SI is 600 plus pages and references a lot of different regulations. As I said, Northern Ireland has got slightly different rules because of the Northern Ireland Protocol, and this came into force on the 1st of January. Northern Ireland still requires CE marking for most goods. So if you're supplying Northern Ireland, you need to apply the CE marking, not the UKCA mark. Under certain circumstances, UKNI marking can be used. This is only if the goods are placed on the Northern Ireland market after the 1st of January 2021. If the goods require a mandatory third-party conformity assessment, so Annex 4 equipment, and if a UK body is used to carry out those conformity assessments after the 1st of January. If those things don't apply, then you do not apply UKNI marking. And again, the government, there's a lot of information on the government website. The most important part of whatever marking you apply, whether you apply CE, UKCA, or both, is addressing the essential health and safety requirements of the directive. And they're virtually the same in the UK regulations. But this is the key part of any technical file. It's the essential health and safety requirements and how they have been addressed. And the courses that we're doing will go through the requirements and explain what you need to do to comply with them. We can use EN standards, European normative standards, to help with that, but we don't have to. Use of standards is voluntary. To apply the CE or the UKCA mark, obtain the essential health and safety requirement reports, risk assessments, calculations, drawings, test results, any information that shows that the machine is compliant and safe. Safety being the important part. Once the technical file's in place, a declaration must be issued, which is a legal document signed by a responsible person declaring that the product is compliant with the relevant directives. The technical file must be made available to any enforcement authorities of any European Economic Area state or the UK for at least 10 years following the date of manufacture of the machinery, or if it's series machinery, of the last unit produced, 10 years after the last unit produced. So the technical file has to be kept for at least 10 years after the last machine is produced. I mentioned EN standards. European normative standards are harmonized to directives. And what this means, if there is a harmonized standard, so for packaging machinery, EN 415 range applies. If you build your machine to the standard and absolutely follow the standard, you don't have to address the essential requirements. You can do a checklist to the standard. And because that standard is harmonized to the machinery directive, there's a presumption of conformity that you conform to the directive if you apply the standard. The existing standards have become designated standards in the UK. There are a few minor changes, but there is a list of standards on the Europa website, and there is a list of standards on the gov.uk website. Compliance with standard gives the presumption of conformity, and this is the gov.uk list of standards. You can buy standards from any EU standards agency. You don't have to buy them from BSI, although you can. Currently, Estonia is the cheapest. If you do buy standards from EVS, buy 3 copies, because 3 is the same price as 2, and there's very little security, which means you can cut and paste them for risk assessments and share them and print them. If you only buy a single copy, you can only print it 2 or 3 times. And the cost for 3 standards is usually in the €30 range. Just make sure you buy the English PDF version, not the Estonian. How to comply. So hopefully you've all got technical files with the essential health and safety requirements addressed for all your machines. So if you've got that in place, there are very few changes. We've put together a checklist that identifies all the different changes, and it's on the PPMA website, and it can be freely downloaded. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and it lists all of the changes. It has a text box which you can drag across. So if the text in that text box is correct, you drag it across. If it's something different, you can type in the text box whatever you want. If it's not applicable, you type NA. You go through that, put the information on the top of what machine it applies to, and then printing it out and save it in the technical file. The changes are things like UK regulations are identified rather than EU, and designated standards are referenced rather than EN standards. There's very few changes. If you don't do it, it's probably not going to make a lot of difference, but if you do it, then it just demonstrates that you've addressed it, that you've thought about it, and that you've considered the changes. Once it's printed out, the document should be added to the technical file. The declaration then needs updating. So if you've got an existing declaration of conformity, if you're supplying into the UK, it will need updating. If you're not supplying the UK but continuing to supply the EU, you can use your existing EC declaration of conformity. But for the UK, it's not an EC declaration, it's just a declaration of conformity. So it can be a joint document. So in this case, it's a joint UK-EC declaration of conformity. The person authorized to compile the technical file for CE marking, so if you're exporting to the EU, there must be an EU-based person that has access to the technical file that can produce the technical file to any authorities that request it on demand. That is an essential for anybody that's exporting to the EU. If there is an authorized representative, they must also be based in the EU. A lot of companies don't have authorized representatives at the moment, but there are changes coming which mean that they might be required in the future. The declaration must reference UK legislation, and that should be identified as amended. So Supply of Machinery Safety Regulations 2008 as amended, as it is likely that new versions will be produced at some point. The place and date of the declaration must be identified. The person signing the declaration must be identified by name and job title. It must be easy to trace the responsible person. The declaration has to be signed. If you issue declarations and don't sign them, they're not adequate, they're not a legal document. And the CE and UKCA markings, which are on the bottom there, are optional, and the declaration number is optional as well. You don't have to have them. So finally, when the machine is safe, the conformity procedure is complete, and the technical file has got all of the information available, the CE or UKCE marking or both can be applied and the declaration of conformity issued. So what this all means, UK-based machinery suppliers to the EU must have an EU person authorised to compile the technical file, identified on the declaration for machinery, and it only applies to machinery, from January the 1st, 2021. It is possible that EU customs could prevent machinery being imported into the EU from GB if the declaration isn't correct and if there isn't an EU person to compile the file. French customs have stopped equipment in the last 6 months going into France. As I say, the requirement for a person authorised to compile a technical file is only within the Machinery Directive. It doesn't apply to any other directives. Whole tech files can assist with this if necessary in the Republic of Ireland. And one of the interesting things is that the requirement for a person to compile a technical file has been removed from the UK legislation. So any non-UK manufacturers don't have to have a technical file available in the UK. So the UK authorities will not be going after non-UK companies. I mentioned changes coming. So from 16th of July, the EU are introducing regulation 2019/1020. And what this does, it requires anyone supplying CE mark products into the EU to have the technical documentation held by an importer or fulfillment centre, or they need an authorised representative based in the EU. And this regulation is based at the the big centres which are selling a lot of equipment, mainly from Asia, which doesn't comply to anything. So they are making the fulfillment centres respond is that anybody exporting machinery from the UK to the EU has to have the technical file held either by an importer, and you might have a dealer, but you might not want to give your technical file to that dealer, or they must have an authorised representative based in the EU. That's why Whole Tech Files was set up. They can do that within the Republic of Ireland. The person to compile a technical file has very little responsibility. So all they have to do is to hand over the technical file to the authorities. So if the technical file is full of rubbish, then you hand that over to the authorities, and the person compiling the file has no responsibility. An authorised representative from 16th of July has a legal responsibility to make sure that the file is actually suitable for purpose. So the authorised representative now has a legal responsibility. So the authorised representative has to check the documentation. If the documentation isn't adequate, the authorised representative can refuse to act as authorised representative, and it becomes illegal to supply machinery into the EU. Medical devices and waste electrical products have additional responsibilities that need specialist assistance, particularly medical. So manufacturers have a responsibility to make sure that their documentation is up to date and adequate. So any technical files that manufacturers have got, they need to be correct because they may be challenged. The declaration will generally require updating for UKCA. The UKCA changes will have to be updated for the UK, and an authorised representative is going to have to be identified if supplying the EU. Some directives, including the Machinery Directive, require the manufacturer's plate to also identify the authorised representative. I don't know if any of you ever watch Roadrunner cartoons, but that's where the Acme Corporation came from. So in conclusion, if you're selling to the EU, you must ensure there is a technical file and a declaration, an EC declaration of conformity, and apply the CE mark. You must ensure there is an EU person to compile a technical file. You must ensure that from 16th of July 2021, there is an authorised representative based in the EU identified on the declaration and the manufacturer's plate. If you're buying from outside of the UK, so if you're importing equipment, you need to check that the equipment is UKCA marked and the declaration is correct. There is the transition period until the end of the year, but you need to be asking for this sort of thing now. It's unlikely that the HSE will prosecute a non-UK organisation, which means marking has actually been carried out properly. So I would always expect that the end user would ask to check a technical file. As a manufacturer, you have no requirement to give a copy of a technical file to anybody, but you should allow them to come to your premises and inspect the technical file. Just a few contact details. I'm a director of Safe Machine, which is a machinery safety consultancy, also of Whole Tech Files in Southern Ireland, and we also provide compliance risk software, which allows essential health and safety requirements and risk assessments to be addressed and effectively produces a technical file. Thanks for listening. I'll now hand over to Shelley for any questions that have come in.
Thank you so much, Derek. You've covered some really important points there, and which I definitely think highlighted the key areas that our members need to follow when conforming to these changes, especially after this year. So thank you. So I just wanted to recap one of the points that you made during your presentation, which was regarding the importing process for machinery and components. So you've mentioned that the onus passes to the end user to ensure compliance, but can you please just reiterate what documents are required for CE UKCA marking to apply at the point of import? And secondly, what are the implications if this is not actually in order?
Right, the main thing is the declaration of conformity. So there has to be a declaration of conformity for UKCA marking. As I said, up until the end of the year, we can still rely on the CE marking, as it's assumed that that's okay. But after 1st of January 2022, the declaration must reference the UK legislation and nothing else. And sorry, it can still reference the directives, but it has to reference the UK legislation.
Okay, so just to confirm, if you import CE marked machines from the EU, do you still need UKCA marking?
You do, yes. Yes, absolutely. And you should, the end user should be asking to see the technical file. Now, they shouldn't have a copy of the technical file, but they should be able to go to the manufacturer's premises and review it and make sure it actually exists.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And also, I understand that our members have to use an EU authorised representative to be able to supply the EU, but what if they don't have an EU representative already in place? Can you please advise where they might find such information, where to refer to when going through the exporting process? And do you know if there's any cost implications for this?
Right. If a UK manufacturer has a sister company or a parent company within the EU, they can use those. If they've got an importer they trust, they can use the importer. If none of those are available, then companies like Hold Tech Files can hold the tech file. So within Hold Tech Files, there's a cost of €600 to hold the file, €500 to review the file to make sure it's suitable for purpose, and a €300 annual fee. And it goes, the contract should last for 10 years.
Okay, thank you, Derek, for clarifying that. You've also referred to a checklist, which can be found on the PPMA website for download. But can you please just explain to the members once again what the checklist is actually for and how they need to use it?
Right, the checklist addresses all of the changes. So all of the changes between the supply of machinery safety regulations and the machinery directive are listed on that checklist. So, and within the checklist, there's 3 columns. So the first column is the requirement, the middle column is what you've actually done about it, and the third column has some standard text. So if the standard text applies, then you can just drag that across into the second column, or you can type anything into the second column to explain why your machine meets that requirement. Or if it's not applicable, you just type NA or not applicable. And you then print that document out and put it in with your technical file, as long as you've addressed the essential requirements for the machinery directive prior to that.
Okay, lovely. I've got a question from a member who's asked, we use CE marking for the pressure equipment directive. Often we do not know the final geographic destination of our products. So is it acceptable to mark products with all 3 logos, CE, UKCA and UKNI?
CE and UKCA, yes. UKNI only applies if a UK body. So if it isn't a UK body carrying out the assessment procedure, then you can't use the UKNI mark.
Okay, so another question from a member, which kind of leads on to what are the circumstances where NI will require UKNI marking under PED?
It's a good question. I'm not an expert on PED. You would really need to speak to a PED consultant. There's companies such as HPI, which are notified bodies in PED. Somebody like that, you would need to go to somebody who really knows the ins and outs of it.
Okay. Another question from a member: does something that isn't a machine, i.e. no moving parts, need to be CE or UKCA marked?
Generally not. The Machinery Directive and the UK regulations define what a machine is, what a partly completed machine is, what lifting equipment is, and all the rest of it. So if it comes under the definitions within the directive or the regulations, then it requires CE marking. If it doesn't, then nothing applies. So you don't apply the marking.
Okay. I was hoping to go through a few what-if scenarios with you, Derek. I hope you don't mind, which might help our members to understand a little bit better, really. So I've got a nice, easy one to start with. So if I'm buying machines in the UK, what should I be looking for?
A UKCA mark and the declaration of conformity that references the UK legislation and is signed and dated and identifies.
Okay, and if I currently only sell to England, Scotland and Wales, do I apply the CE marking or UKCA marking?
If you only supply to England, Scotland and Wales, you would only apply the UKCA marking, because there would be no point in having an authorised representative for CE. So the UKCA will be all that you would want to do.
And is that the same for Northern Ireland? Do you also need an EU authorised representative for this?
Unfortunately for Northern Ireland, you have to apply CE marking, and you do need an authorised representative to supply Northern Ireland.
Okay, another question is, if I put together a line of machines from different suppliers, do the individual machines need CE marking, UKCA marking, or both? And does the entire line also need CE marking or UKCA marking?
Right. If the machines within the line are connected, so if the safety systems are connected, so you operate an e-stop and it stops everything, so the safety systems are linked, then that becomes an assembly of machines, and that would need to be UKCA marked because it's the first use. So it hasn't already been used anywhere else. It's the first use, so it needs UKCA marking from the date it was supplied. The individual machines could still be CE marked. If the line is individual machines that are not linked electrically or by control systems, so the standalone machines, so you have to start each one and they operate on product, then each machine should be either CE marked or UKCA marked at the moment. But at the end of the year or into next year, they must be UKCA marked, each of them.
Okay, and
CE does not apply. Sorry, Shelley, CE does not apply in the UK after the end of this year. So it has to be UKCA after the end of this year.
Right, okay, thank you. What if a member doesn't have a technical file for their machines?
Tut tut. If you haven't got a technical file, you can't demonstrate that the machine is safe and compliant. And if you issue a declaration, you're declaring something that you can't prove. So the point of the technical file is to prove that the machine is safe and compliant. So if there isn't a technical file, you can't prove it's safe and compliant. And if an accident happened, you're liable to prosecution.
Okay. Another what if question. So if I import machines from Asia into the UK, where does the technical file have to be held?
Right, if you're importing machines from Asia into the UK,
yep.
The technical file can be held in Asia. Now, one of the big problems is that a lot of Asian machines don't always follow the absolute requirements. And how do you prove there is a technical file unless you actually go and have a look? So it's the point. If you imported an Asian machine into the EU, there has to be an EU authorized representative. So the technical file should be held in the EU. So it seems a retrograde step that the UK is accepting machines without technical files being held in the UK.
Okay. Another question from one of the members. Our company builds machines in Japan, and the UK office then sells to end users in the UK, Ireland and Northern Ireland. So asking, can we use both CE and UKCA markings with technical files showing both standards?
Yes, that's the way to do it. If you're supplying Northern Ireland and the UK and EU, then CE and UKCA are both relevant and both have to be applied.
Okay. So can I apply CE, UKCA, and UKNI markings on all machines?
Not UKNI. You can only apply UKNI when it's subject to a type approval, an Annex 4 machine, and that's been done by a UK body. So that is the only time you can use UKNI. All of the machines should have CE, UKCA, or both UKCA and CE.
Okay. And the last question that we have time for, which is back to the EU representative. So is it just an EU-based person living in the EU or working for a company registered in the EU that would apply?
It can be. It has to be an EU person. So an EU company is classed as a person, or an individual is classed as a person. So if there is somebody living in the EU that is prepared to accept responsibility and hold the technical file, yes, no problem.
Okay. Do you think that we've got time for one more question, Eric? Or
yes, sir. Well, yeah. I have.
Okay. Last question is: in an inspection from an authorised agency required in order to mark the machine UKCA, especially on the electrical level?
No, it's self-certification. So unless it's an Annex 4 machine that is not built to a standard, machinery compliance with the machinery or the supply machinery safety regulations is self-declaration. So it's up to the person signing the declaration of conformity to ensure that they comply, or the machine complies with all requirements. You don't need anybody else. It should be the manufacturer that's doing it in most cases. So okay. You certainly don't need an agency or a consulting company to do it.
All right, I'm going to squeeze one more question in if you don't mind, Eric. Sorry. Okay, in the Isle of Man, I've reworded this slightly. So will it be accepted only for UKCA from the 1st of January 22?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
I don't know. I've never looked into what the Isle of Man requirements are.
Uh-huh.
I would expect UKCA, but I'd have to check on it. I really don't know.
We can come back on that one. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all the questions that we have time for, I'm afraid. Thank you so much, Derek, for covering this subject with us today. It's been a very interesting topic in regards to for our members, really. You've made the process appear quite straightforward. I'm sure it's not, but it's, yeah, you've delivered fantastically. So thank you so much once again. Lastly, I just wanted to remind our members that we're currently running training seminars on this particular topic, which goes into great further detail. So if you want to take advantage of this, then obviously contact me, let me know by email or call, or you can book onto one of these courses by visiting our training pages on our website. So let me know if you have any further issues with regards to that. I'm also going to pop a link in the chat in regards to a LinkedIn page that Derek is currently answering questions on as well. So if you have any further follow-up questions more specific to this area, then follow the link once I put it through into the chat. Just give me a moment and I'll do that. So that concludes our webinar for this morning. A reminder that a very short survey will pop up at the end of this meeting when we finish. It really appreciate it if you could complete that for us today. We really do value your feedback. And I wish to thank you all for joining us this morning, and I do hope that you found the content to be of value and interest. And I hope to see you at our next members event. So thank you very much and take care. Thank you again, Derek.
Thank you.